Okay, so thank you very much for coming. I'm Lisa Ashmore. I'm a senior lecturer here in Lancaster Medical School. We've got members of the research team here at the front who will introduce themselves shortly. But first of all, I'm going to hand over to Alistair, who's the Chief Executive of North West Cancer Research, and he's going to introduce today's, this evening's event. Is that right?
Yeah, good. Thank you. I'll shout.
For the recording and for anyone who might need.
Normally I just shout. Right, okay, tell me if I'm deafening everyone. Nice to see you all. It's nice to get back to sort of face-to-face events, isn't it? And seeing real people. And we've suddenly realised that there is more to a person than sort of the heads and shoulders. There's a whole waist-down thing going on. I'm Alistair. I'm the Chief Executive of North West Cancer Research. And essentially we are here as the funder of this project. But I suspect many of you might not have come across North West Cancer Research before. So just to kind of give you a 2-minute overview of us and what we do. So we're a charity based in the northwest of England, based down in Liverpool actually. And we fund research which is focused on the cancer types which have an impact in the northwest. It's not that funny. It's like being on the Zoom session, isn't it? And someone's dog comes in and you know that the rest of the team are actually just looking at the dog and they're not listening to you at all. It's gone. Come back. I didn't mean it. So we fund research into sort of the cancers which have greatest impact in the northwest of England. So for those of you that don't know, if you live in the northwest of England, you're much more likely than the national average to experience cancer in your lifetime. And often the prognosis is worse as well. We tend to be diagnosed later, and that means that treatment is much more difficult, and potentially it means that mortality is higher. So for us, we fund work which looks at the causes of cancer, how we improve the treatment for people that have cancer, and then ultimately, like all charities, all funders, we're looking for the cure that's out there. And of course, cancer, more than 220 different conditions, so cure is not one single silver bullet, but hey, we're going to invest and we're still going to be out there looking for it. So in terms of this project, it fits very nicely into that category of, trying to improve treatment and care for people with cancer. And this one actually, for us, came out of the blue. We've got a very long history of funding fundamental science research. And this project landed into one of our research funding panels. And we all looked at it and we went, that's an amazing project. But I wonder if it'll get through the funding panel, because when you've got a panel made up of eminent profs who are all fundamental scientists, they don't always look on things that focus on patients and patient outcomes in such a kindly way. But we were absolutely delighted that it aced the panel meeting. It got funding from us, and it's been an absolute pleasure working with this research team over the last few years. So for us, it's absolutely brilliant that we've got to this point. And we've got a little book that's come out of it, which talks about patient experiences. It's got our name on the back of it, so we're very proud of that. But actually great to be here and see other people that are going to pick this up, take forward the learning from this, and, hopefully take it forward into practice. So absolutely great that this project has reached a conclusion and has reached this stage. But we're also a little bit gutted that this project is coming to an end, because we've loved working with this team. No. So I'm going to hand over now to Lisa, and Lisa's going to take us through the rest of the evening. But from our perspective, it's been absolutely great working with this team and great seeing their research come together.
Thank you. Thanks, Alistair. That's great. So I don't want to talk too much, but I do want to give you a little bit of an overview of the project and what landed us with the book that's in front of you, because I know some of you might be coming to it cold, some of you have heard about it too much and probably don't need any information. So I just want to give a bit of an overview. So this project came about, it was about 4 or 5 years ago when Danny and I were having a conversation about advances in radiotherapy treatment and the silences that exist in these advances, mostly the patient voice. So when we are developing new techniques, who is asking the patients, can you tolerate that? What is that like? Actually, does anybody know what it is like to have radiotherapy treatment? It was just a big void. Nobody really ever speaks about radiotherapy. There's a lot about chemotherapy. It's very present in the media. You see it all over. So we wanted to shine a light on radiotherapy experiences. So we developed this project in collaboration with Clatterbridge. We recruited 16 patients from Clatterbridge who, from day one of treatment to 6 months after they'd started treatment, gave us narratives of their experiences. So some people submitted a daily kind of list of what was happening for them. Some people sent us weekly, monthly. Some people just sent us 1 or 2 narratives. So those 16 people kind of gave us their experience of treatment for gynae cancer. And then we also had 18 patients who submitted narratives from the point of finishing treatment up to 25 years later. So those people sent us narratives, maybe just one, or a big kind of reflection on what it was like for them now. So we've got this kind of big range of experiences from the day one all the way up to 25 years post-treatment. And we really wanted to focus on, you know, what is it like to have radiotherapy? How do people see themselves? What is their identity as they have treatment? We're focusing on gynae cancers because they're often hidden. People don't talk about them very much. The experience of having a gynae cancer is often very personal, internalised. There's no ribbon for a gynae cancer, or there's no kind of big, you know, fundraisers. So we wanted to really shine this light and work with the patient's experiences to look at what is it like for you having radiotherapy. We were quite overwhelmed by some of the narratives that we got. Some of them were really quite difficult to read. It was our original intention that we would just submit the narrative, put the narratives online, and people would be able to read them in as whole stories and be able to engage with them. But actually some of that was quite raw, and we just felt in the end that it was just too much to be able to just put them out there like that. So that's why we've kind of chunked them up into these sections in the book that you've got in your hands today. So there are 7 sections, and we've structured it around conversations. So we've taken those narratives and we've pulled together themes around 7 conversations that we think we need to continue having around radiotherapy treatment for gynaecological cancer. They are conversations about treatment, conversations about life, conversations about sexual selves, conversations about late effects, conversations about dignity, communication, and then trauma. As you move through the book, we have put a content warning at the start because some of the stuff is quite difficult to read, but we want to enable people to move forward in a productive way to make care better. So we haven't done this to kind of sensationalise experience. We haven't done things to kind of shine a light on poor experience. We're not trying to do that at all. What we want to do is say we think that care for people with gynaecological cancer who are having radiotherapy can be better, and we can only do that through conversation. So as researchers in conversation with that data, as researchers in conversation with practitioners, with patients, just to move this forward, and actually let's get it on the agenda. Let's start saying it isn't great. We can clap and we can celebrate the NHS, we can do all this, but there are things that we need to do that are different. So this is what we want to do. I am going to introduce the research team. Well, they're going to introduce themselves. Are you happy to go first? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Corinne Salisbury. I'm one of the therapy radiographers at Lancaster Cancer Centre, and the main is I'm a non-treatment review radiographer, reviewing patients and stuff with the doctors.
I'm just going to, I don't think that was working, so I'm going to hand you that one.
Did you hear me then?
Well, it's just for the mic.
It's a microphone.
There you go.
My name's Corinne Singleton, and I came onto this research programme because I have had a gynaecological cancer, which was treated with radiotherapy, so I came on as a patient.
Good evening, my name's Danny Hutton. I'm the Programme Manager for the North West Radiotherapy Operational Delivery Network, so working with the 3 radiotherapy providers, so the Clatterbridge Cancer Centre, the Christie and Lancs Teaching Hospital. I guess I had 2 roles on this project. The first one was to link up Lancaster University with Clatterbridge, and then I had an interest in how we can better design systems and processes to best support patients before, during and after their radiotherapy.
Hello, I'm Hilary. I was a researcher on the project alongside Mette, and I'm now in the Division of Health Research.
Thank you. So Mette is the one who's juggling her childcare, so hopefully she'll be able to join us at some point. But so Mette was also a researcher on the project working at Lancaster. So we don't want to do loads of talking at you, but what I thought we'd do is we're just going to have a bit of a conversation. I've got some questions I want to ask our researchers, and then I'm going to throw it open to everybody else to ask some questions, and then we can go back out there, top up our glasses, and do a bit of networking and mingling. Okay, so I'm going to move over. Is this annoying, this moving through this? Okay, great. The QR code is, if you want to get other copies of the book, you can scan that QR code. It'll take you to the link where you can get that. Okay, so, thank you. I'm going to start with Corinne. So, we have sent the book now to all of the participants who submitted narratives as part of the project, and we've started that. We've had postal strikes. Oh, we've had all sorts in this project. We've had pandemics, we've had postal strikes, we've had all a lot. So they're slowly getting delivered now to the participants, and we're getting some feedback from them, and it's great to see the feedback and people talking about how they've experienced the book. And somebody has said to us that, I'm going to read this, I cannot emphasise how important it is for people, regardless of what stage you are on your cancer voyage, to obtain a copy and have a good read. And so, Corinne, I wondered if you could reflect on what it would have meant to you to have a book like this going into treatment and also post-treatment, because we do talk about late effects.
Do I need this? Does it? Yeah, okay. I think it would have made all the difference in the world. All the difference in the world. They say that hindsight's a wonderful thing, don't they? And I guess this is as near as you get to hindsight, because what you're doing is you're actually reading other people's accounts of what it has been like for them to go through the radiotherapy treatment and beyond. For me, personally, the booklets and the information that I was given pre-treatment, I think one of the women who wrote their narratives described what they'd read as the Disney version, and that kind of, I would concur with that. That's kind of how it felt to me. Not that it wasn't accurate in many respects, certainly in terms of what I was to expect from my treatment, I would say that it was pretty accurate, but for what came later, it was a million miles away from what I actually experienced. I was led to believe that in terms of late effects, that if I suffered one of these late effects, I would be very unlucky. It's 6 years later, and I seem to be suffering from pretty much all of them. Even when you think about, pelvic therapy radiation, what's in your pelvis, you've got all your sexual function, bowels, bladder, intestine, lymph nodes. And certainly for me, every single one of those has been affected. So either I am extraordinarily unlucky, or if I am, so were quite a lot of the other women who wrote these narratives. So, it wasn't even, for me, it wasn't even until I joined this group that I realised that all these separate symptoms that I was suffering from, actually I could join the dots and say, oh, maybe... In fact, I think it was something that Lorraine said at a meeting. I thought, oh, maybe that's what I've got. And I'd gone to my GP and discussed things, and they had never joined the dots either. So I felt there was, this very big gap between what is acknowledged as a result of radiotherapy treatment and what I was led to believe might happen before my treatment. And you were saying, what effect would that have been, before I had my treatment and afterwards? Afterwards, I guess I would have felt heard. I would have felt acknowledged, and I realised that the nature of the The effects is that it's progressive and it's not going to get better. But it would have been nice to have been acknowledged and for me to be able to make sense of it. Beforehand, had I known about it beforehand, that is a big unknown, isn't it? I guess when you sign that consent form, you believe that you're signing it with all the information that is available being told to you. And yeah, that's a big question. Maybe that information wasn't as available as it ought to have been. Maybe it was available and it just, people were trying to soften the edges by not making it seem as scary as it might be. But it certainly raised questions to me about consent for radiotherapy.
Thanks, Corinne, and thank you for that very honest. It's really hard for us as there's plenty of professionals in the room to hear that, but it's really important that we do hear those messages. And Danny, I'm going to put you on the spot now because we've talked a lot about, what do we do with this? And we have a tendency to be quite defensive as professionals and say, oh, but it's because of this, or you wouldn't have taken it in if we'd have given you more information. And so what do you think that we can do with this book as professionals to kind of move the conversation forward?
Yeah, I think I'd echo that when I started to read some of these narratives and we discussing them. I did find myself quite defensive on behalf of myself and my profession, so I had to sort of stop that and sit on my hands. As you said, Lisa, I think the narratives are extremely powerful and they really bring to life the emotion and experience that people go through that you maybe don't get from your clinical experience, where you know people are going to have these effects, but you don't perhaps realise the impact, you don't realise how long that might be. So what I think I'd like for this book is to really give practitioners the valuable insight of what that means in real life for people. Because it certainly caused me to reflect. It wasn't always comfortable, but it caused me to reflect, and I'd like my colleagues who still delivering radiotherapy to reflect on that. I think something we do in the book is these, at the end of each chapter, is these pauses for conversations around a certain topic. And I think we've put them in so people can pause, reflect. I think there's some really powerful lessons in this book. There's some good things that we need to carry on doing, we do well, and we need to do that and do more of it. But there's also some things that we should definitely avoid and do better. So I guess my hope is that my colleagues, practitioners engage in this, read it with an open mind. As the experts, we've only got part of the puzzle. The patient voice is the other big part of the puzzle. To get around with the experience of what radiotherapy is like. You said you don't know what radiotherapy is like till you've been through it. That's absolutely true. I've been doing it for 15 years or so, but I only know a small part of what I do. So I think it's a really valuable opportunity just to make things better for patients before, during, and importantly after, because I think that's a missed part of the radiotherapy pathway at the moment. It was being critical to the aftercare. Yeah,
definitely. I should have mentioned that we are missing one of our researchers who's currently got COVID. So Vicky Singleton is a professor of sociology here at Lancaster, and she's also been key on the project. And I think if she was here, she would have picked up on that point that you've just said there about conversation and promoting conversation. And when we were thinking about the audience for the book, we didn't know whether we were writing for patients or whether we were writing for practitioners, whether it was two separate books. And then we decided it was important that as our patient audience could see that we were challenging our practitioner audience, and also for our practitioner audience that we are, trying to support patients to ask questions and to challenge the care that they're being given. So we really want to stress this idea of conversations and bringing everybody together. Mette, it's all right, don't worry, Corinne. We will skip over Mette, yeah, we'll skip over that. But Lorraine, are you happy to? Yeah, come on. So you'll notice that our research team, we're not not everybody was a researcher when we started this project, and that is really important to us. You know, we've got patients and we've got practitioners, and that means that sometimes sitting in these kind of situations, we're pushing people out of their comfort zone. And
I feel like I'm on question time.
I know. Or mastermind, I should be facing you or something. But actually, the reason you were on the project is because your specialist subject is radiotherapy, and you know so much about this, and you've brought so much experience to the project. And I wondered if for some of the practitioners who are in the audience, you could reflect on what it was like to get involved in research, because you'd done a master's, I think, hadn't you? And then you'd gone on to do a dissertation as part of that, but you'd not done any research kind of on the ground.
The reason why I was brought into the research was to do the consent, and plus I was face-to-face with these patients. First of all, very, very nervous, and when Danny approached me, I was super excited, but on the other hand, I was thinking, oh my God, what have I let myself in for? But when I met this team, I was totally put at ease. I would definitely go into research again. For me, I've loved the gynae, the side of it. You can tell I'm dead nervous, can't you? I've loved the gynae side of it, and I'd like to progress my career with gynae, and because of this research project is what I've got out of it. Plus learning how to consent people, giving them more information, listening to patients. So it's like you get a lot of patients saying, well, actually I've forgotten. But half of these patients I saw through their treatment as well. So if anything gets said, then they would ask me again. But I encourage that to ask the radiographers as well, because we do tend to sort of push it aside. Oh, well, you've already consented, you know, but sometimes you can't take everything in. And regarding the sexual side, again, Corinne, was it the dilators with yourself? Yeah, and I was actually dead amazed when she sort of said, well, why can't you ask the partners to introduce, to help, because it's like a closeness. And that's really taken me forward as well, talking about sex where we never used to do it. But with prostate patients, I talk about erections all the time. But why not with women? So that's taken me quite, further into my clinical practice. So I'd like to look at, for us, is to do a late effects clinic as well. Is there anything else you want to know?
No, that's amazing. Thank you, Lorraine. And then people might have questions later.
I think you asked me what I'd like. Thanks, Lorraine. I think you asked me what I'd want from practitioners. It's Lorraine, I should have said, really. We want to change and inform practice, make it better. I think you've done that. As you've adapted to, you've heard things, said, I'm going to change what I'm doing my clinic tomorrow. You're having different conversations, you think about late effects, you think about sexuality, really expose a light on where we don't do things well. So it's already happening. So I think it's more of Lorraine's out changing it, is what we want.
Patients as well. We've got rectums, women still rectum. It's everything, isn't it? Could you hear me there?
Thank you. Okay, thank you. So, Hilary. Yeah. So, as Hilary said when she introduced herself, you're now working on another project. When you came into this project, your experience wasn't in radiotherapy, it wasn't in cancer. You're a sociologist in disability studies, but you brought all of your expertise to this project and challenged us to think about cancer as a disability. And I wonder if you could talk a bit about how you're taking forward what you did in this project into your future projects.
Thank you, that was very kind. As I said, I'm now in DHR, and at the moment I'm working on trauma and trauma-informed approaches. And so a lot of the things that the women have shared in their narratives rings really strongly for me when I think about concepts of trauma and the importance of trauma-informed approaches in healthcare. I think one thing I will be taking away with me is the importance of being a little bit ambivalent towards things that might commonsensically seem good. And by that I mean when people say things like they're just carrying on or they're just getting on with it, when people speak about hope or resilience, or if people talk about the practice of mindfulness in particular, that these things can all cover up or silence experiences. And so that an important part of overcoming distress or overcoming trauma is being given the opportunity to tell your story, especially when you feel like you might not have had as much control over that situation as you would have liked, and being able to connect that to systems that could be and should be better. And that's an important part of being able to move on from distress. That's what I would be taking forward with me.
Oh, thank you, Hilary. And I think there is a section, the 7th section is on trauma, and Hilary pushed us to include that, and we were nervous about including that. And we've got Mark Limmer in the audience today, who was on our steering group. We had other practitioners who were on our steering group, and we kept taking these questions to the steering group saying, should we be including this? And the answer was yes, and because we want to be honest and we want to, make a difference and support people and challenge this, idea that you can, put a smiley face on it. I mentioned ribbons before, that that it is difficult, and we need to engage with the difficulty to actually make things better. So, and I'm really, obviously, I can't be pleased about what you've taken away from it, but I am pleased that you were on the project to be able to take that forward and push us to do that. Mette really wanted to talk about the participants and how grateful we are to the participants for sharing their stories in such a really honest way and for engaging with us. And I'm really pleased the way Alistair introduced the project earlier, because it is really important for us to, when we are doing developments, to be engaging with the patient voice and to be thinking about their story. So we would like to say thank you to the participants as well. Because I think that they are really going to help move this forward. And so now I want to open it up to our audience. And Nate's going to so you have to use the microphone, people, okay? So Nate is going to be our roaming mic, but I need to give you one, Lieutenant. So has anybody got any questions? Or panel, have you got any questions? No. It's a bit mean because we've not given you time to actually engage with the book, so how can you ask a question? But right, Nate, Mark's got a question out there. It needs to be green for it to work.
Thank you for that. And as Lisa said, I was really lucky enough to be part of the advisory group for this project, and I think it's been one of the most enjoyable projects for me to be part of. And I think that's partly being able to have the luxury of sitting back and watching other people do some really top-class research, which was fantastic. But one of the reasons I was interested in getting involved and still am interested in what you're doing is really relating to the place of sexual pleasure in some of these narratives, and I'll be interested to hear what you have to say about that. Partly because I think in other work that I've done, we see the pleasure that we should have in sex is always secondary to the function. So it's either, in my work, it's contraception. So effective contraception trumps pleasure, and I'm wondering whether kind of sort of treatment concerns trump sexual pleasure. That sexual pleasure actually gets lost as a concern.
I'm happy to answer that. No one's fighting me. Yeah, definitely. And I think that the way in which sexual pleasure is often talked about in practice is in this kind of deficit model. Yeah. So, and it's something that has to be fixed because it's broken, and so we will send you for counselling, or we will do something, but actually it's not addressed as a mundane part of treatment as you would address, washing or, those kind of things. So I think that one of the things that we've done building from this project is we've had some money from the ESRC Impact Accelerator account, and we have run some workshops looking at how radiographers can talk about sexual pleasure as part of their routine care. So often we have treatment review radiographers who will do reviews, and they say, they'll deal with the sexual pleasure and they'll have the tricky conversations and they get all the training and they do all of that stuff. But if you have a question when you walk through the door and there's radiographers and somebody just goes bright red and goes, I don't know what to say about that, then it's shut down. And then when will you bring that up again? How can you bring that up again? Because you've rallied yourself to ask that question, and then it's just not gone anywhere. So what we have tried to do is build that into routine care, and what we want to do is get people to move away from this deficit model, that it is, it's your human right. Actually, sexual wellness is there. It's in the definition of well-being. It is one of your human rights to have sexual well-being, and that if we are treating people for cancer and are disrupting that or destroying that in some way, which some of these narratives maybe would have us think that is the case, then we need to address that. I don't think I answered your question, but I liked talking about that stuff, so I just went for it. Does anybody want to add anything? Corinne.
It's interesting. I was noticing what you're saying about that contraception trumps sexual pleasure, and certainly the impression from a lot of these narratives was that when you were speaking about the dilators that women are given, that actually you were told to use these because you might need to be examined at some point. Not that actually it might be really important for your own sexual well-being. So yeah, definitely there was a definite trumping of you have to use these because it's practical, because a doctor might need to go there. Not that actually it's part of your body that is responsible for your sexual pleasure. So yeah, definitely that trumping happens.
Just why Nate's working with the mic. I think the other thing as well is it's having those conversations. We don't wait for patients to engage in other sorts of conversations, but we do for sexual conversations. And I think, I speak for most radiographers, we're quite happy if they don't come up, and that's because we haven't got the skills and competence to deal with them, but we need them. And it shouldn't be a specialist radiographer. It should be the treatment radiographer who's seeing those patients on day by day and got the rapport. So there's lots of work to do.
Hiya, so I'm Tina Robinson. I'm a therapeutic radiographer, but I work for Matt Cancer Support at the moment. And I was interested particularly in your question. Is it Peter? Mark, sorry, I got that wrong. So I was interested in your question, Mark, because I remember from a past job of being a researcher myself, working with someone who was a service user and had helped us with some research we were doing, talking about intimacy and sexual pleasure. And in some ways, his feeling was that it was not necessarily that it was not spoken about. It was spoken about in a way that needed to be fixed, which I think is what Lisa was alluding to. And we do have this tendency, don't we, as health professionals, that we want to be able to fix things. So if we can't fix them, we kind of put them in that box of, we'll maybe talk about that later. And actually for him, he said that he understood it couldn't be fixed, and it had been spoken about at consent, but it had been spoken about in terms of erectile dysfunction or clinical terms rather than intimacy with his wife of 40 years. And it wasn't necessarily the sex that was the problem for them. It was the lack of intimacy and the lack of that closeness within their relationship. And he actually felt like he was going mad because it hadn't been mentioned at consent. For him, it wasn't validated. So even if we can't fix things, I think it's about going back to basics of mentioning what can happen, so that people recognise that it could be something that is likely to affect them and their partners, so that at least they recognise that it's been spoken about and therefore it is valid, their concern, and it's not just them that are feeling it. And I think you alluded to that earlier, Corinne, as well, didn't you, when you thought that speaking to other people was the first time you'd realised and put to join the dots.
Thank you. John.
I'm stealing your job. I'm sorry. My name's John Appleby. I'm a lecturer in medical ethics at the med school. I'm one of Lisa's colleagues. And I guess hearing about how, consent is involved and how, these stories could really have affected everyone currently involved in offering these treatments and other patients. I just wondered, this seems like a great resource that could be used to kind of train everyone else that will be coming, all the other healthcare professionals coming in that will be dealing with things across a range of professions, even just to understand people's experience of this generally, because we spend so much time in, for example, medical education, trying to think about how to cultivate people's sense of empathy and everything else. And these kind of stories, in the medical school, we often end up having to fabricate them in scenarios. These are the real deal. I just wondered what your plans might be to make use of this, to kind of work it into training materials, work it into people's awareness, so that when they actually do arrive into practice, they're aware of all the valuable stuff that you guys have drawn out and put in a resource like this book.
Yeah, good question. We should do that. I think it is a really good way of training people, and I think that, you know, I don't want... we teach people about consent, and it's messier than the legalities, isn't it, of consent. And we talk about, we've done informed consent because we've given out the leaflets and we've given this and we've given you the statistics, but we don't do anything to think about consent as an ongoing performance of conversation, of you know, it shouldn't be the thing that happens 2 weeks before you start your treatment and then that is you forever. You know, you should have opportunities to come back. And I would love to do some work on training around consent. I think it would be great.
In a e-learning that we've been designing, we've started and ended with different digital stories. And the learning outcomes have been co-designed by the people who've shared those stories. So each story is individual and is relevant to the learning material that we were covering, but the person who's told those stories has had an input then. Well, actually, they've designed it. We haven't had an input at all. They've said what they want those learning outcomes to be for the people who take part in that.
I think the way we do consent's changing as well. I think in the past, or until recently, we focused mainly on the acute effects of radiotherapy. We went so good at saying the late effects. We've recently nationally moved to standardised consent forms, which were developed by the Royal College of Radiologists. I think for the first time they really explicitly state, and picking up on your experience, I think you felt that the acute was perhaps explained, the late was not touched upon. So I think now it forced that conversation. That's a standardised consent form. So I think that's something that is improving, but slowly.
And actually from the work that we did on talking about sexual pleasure, we've actually gone back to the RCOG, Royal College, and asked them to modify that consent form to think about sexual pleasure in terms of women's bodies, because if you look at the male consent form, it talks about erectile dysfunction, but it doesn't actually mention anything about sexual pleasure on the Gynaecological Cancer. So we have we've motivated a group who are pushing back about that, trying to change that consent form already. You have to wait for the microphone and then we'll come to Hazel.
Sorry, it was just a point about consent, and I think something that Danny said. I'm going to get your name wrong now, and Revenge Tina said as well. And I think we have to think about how we do consent that's actually uses language that people understand. So if we keep talking about erectile dysfunction, that may or may not be the issue. But if we talk about intimacy, or actually ask the question about how this treatment might affect your sex life and how you get your sexual pleasure and those kind of things. And I think you alluded to it, Danny, we kind of hide behind, we either try and avoid it or we hide behind language that means the conversation goes no further. And I think so there is something not only about trying to get consent, but really thinking about the language that might open up a conversation rather than language that just allows us to say we've covered that part of consent.
Thanks, Nate. Can you take it to Hazel, who's the lady here with the denim jacket?
Thank you. So I'm Hazel. I'm the Deputy Chief Allied Health Professional for Lancashire Teaching, therapeutic radiographer by background. First, I have to say what a fantastic piece of research you've done. So well done to everybody involved. Really sort of insightful and powerful. So fantastic. And because it's so fantastic, Mike, I've got two questions. The first one is about how you plan to disseminate it, because you don't want such great research just sat getting dusty on a shelf. So we're here, we're engaged, we're listening. but I'm thinking you need to get into radiotherapy departments, you need to, and John spoke about education, so question one is sort of educating the radiotherapy departments. And Corinne, you mentioned about primary care and GPs not joining up the dots, and I've heard this story unfortunately many times before, and just the panel's thoughts on how do we infiltrate primary care and get them to join the dots up with late effects in radiotherapy, because unfortunately you in the primary care setting you come in with some symptoms and they're not recognising that the late effects, so I think there's a huge gap there.
Danny, can you fix that? Oh no, Corinne, you fix it.
I'm just sort of replying to the point that you directed at me. Yeah, that was definitely the case for me, and it seems to have been the case for a lot of the women as well. One of the women's narratives said something like she'd been to see somebody about her late effects, and the health professional had said to them, "I'm not saying there's a link, but I see a lot of women like you." And personally, I went to my GP with a particular symptom and was sent off, so a bladder issue, was sent off to be on a waiting list to go and see a bladder specialist. I had IBS-y kind of things, and so I was sent, and it literally wasn't until I think it was Lorraine had, as I say, was at a meeting and mentioned something. I went, oh, that's what it is. So yeah, I mean, as far as I'm concerned as a patient, I would like everybody who deals with women who have gynecological cancer to read the book, because we all need it. It's not just the patients who need to read it, all of the health professionals. I would like to see them reading it.
Yeah, I think it's important, sort of, how do we better inform our colleagues in primary care? I think we start by better informing the patients. That goes back to the consent form, so they're aware of what effects they might get, particularly the late effects. I think a big step is the patient-reported outcome measures, or PROMs. So we're looking at sort of how we better documentate and ask patients' views. At the moment, we know that tends to be recorded by doctors and health professionals, and they're often underreported. So we get the PROMs. I think that's a step. But I think it's and we talked a lot when we write the book, but we don't want to put more responsibility on the patients. So we need to be conscious of that. But I think it's reasonable that we make sure they're informed and knowledge, so they'll come and then they can help join the dots. So when they're going to GP saying, I've got this and I believe it could be related. So that's a bit of a cop-out answer, I accept that. But I think that will be right, and then making sure the GPs know the referral into the late effects service, which takes on to another thing. We need to start establishing a late effects service. We need the PROMs to make the evidence that we need them. So it's a bit of so we're trying to do that in parallel in the Northwest, because we know we will make a case, PROMs will make the case that we need more late effects services.
In terms of spreading the book, so a copy has been sent to every radiotherapy centre in the UK. A copy has been sent to every higher education institution that does radiotherapy training. So that's where we've started. We've got enough copies, hopefully, that people share the link, get people to request a copy. We will post one out for free. We want to send that out there. We're hoping to do some work with Clatterbridge to talk about the book, and we're going to go there and going to do something there. And I think that as a team, we would be more than happy to go and speak to people and to share what we've done or what people might be able to do in their own centres as well, just to think about it.
Yes, please.
And actually, even on social media, it's being shared. There's actually a Facebook group for people who have had radiotherapy, who've had lymphedema as a result of gynecological cancer treatment. And even, I put a post on about it, just because I did. And in fact, the woman who was admin there said, "Oh yeah, I've already spoken to Lisa, we're on it." So, social media is actually one of the main methods of communication, isn't it? So, yeah, that is, that's another way forward, isn't it?
And one of the things we've got to think about as well is we need to make things better for people who are coming through, so the conversations on consent and those things. But we have got thousands of people who have been through radiotherapy for gynaecological cancer who could be sitting at home and have no idea that the reason that they can't walk their dog anymore because they can't be more than 10 minutes away from a toilet is because of a consequence of their radiotherapy treatment. And it's not okay. That we need to. So we want to educate people to say this could be from your radiotherapy, and then, you know, unfortunately, flood the GP surgery, and then we'll get the late effects clinic. Flood everywhere, and I think that we need to just start banging the drum. So on the back of the book, we have a manifesto. This is what we, as a research team, you know, we're asking you all now today to consider these 10 points of how we can change treatment. What can we do to make radiotherapy treatment better? How can we incorporate these points that have come from the patient narratives into care and into services, because we just need to move things on now. On that, I am going to say that we should go back out there, top up our glasses, have a mill around, but we're happy to answer any questions. Come and find us, and yeah, thank you very much.
Just before we do, can I just say a big thank you to Lisa and the team. I, like Lorraine, approached this from the point of view of somebody who'd never ever been involved in anything like this before. Wasn't really quite sure what I was doing, and I have to say that every single meeting has not only been interesting and intellectually stimulating, but it's been the warmest, most inclusive place to be, and I think I really, really valued that from everybody in the team. And I just want to say, with that knowledge, to say thank you very much.